Hi everyone, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for another PB&J card class. And in today's video, I will be creating 3 cards and each will feature our Creative Die paper scroll. I've gotten a lot of questions about how I like to ink up this Creative Die and it's super easy to do, so I thought it's about time I create a video to show you that. I'm also going to share with you some easy techniques for stamping with our Brushstroke stamps and where you don't have to do much painting and they just give you that beautiful watercolor look. And I will also be featuring some of the sentiments from our new Happy Heart Day collection. So before we begin, I just wanted to pop up here on screen a list of all the supplies, stamps, colors, inks, everything I'll be using to create these cards today. And I will put this back up on screen at the very end of the video. So if you want to see anything in more detail at that time, you can just hit pause and check it all out. So to begin, I'm going to be working with our paper scroll creative die. This comes with 3 size scrolls and a cute little butterfly there that you can use. And the largest scroll is just a little bit under a standard A2 size card, the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So you can use it to create a shaped card, which I will show you today. So first, I've cut the panels I'll be stamping on out of Canson 140-pound cold pressed watercolor paper, but I also went ahead and die cut this with Eclipse masking paper. So I just put that masking paper on a piece of cardstock and ran it through my die cutting machine. And I'm so sorry I'm off camera here, but all I did then was go ahead and trim off the top portion of that scroll, and I'm going to put that masking paper down onto that watercolor paper that we'll be stamping on, because I want to mask off sort of the part of the scroll that will be curling up, and then also down here at the bottom what will be curling around towards the bottom. So the first stamp we'll be stamping with is our Lilacs Brushstroke stamp. So I have my watercolor paper in my Misty Stamp Positioning tool. It's masked off at the top, at the bottom of that scroll. And I'm just going to use just a little bit of painter's tape here to separate the leaves portion of this stamp from the flowers. This just makes it easy to apply my ink down on those leaves. And I'm using Wendy Make Art blendable die inks. And I can mist these with water. So I just inked it up, misted it with a mini mister of water, and I'm stamping that down onto my watercolor paper. And I'm just going to use a paintbrush. I grabbed a water brush. You can just use a regular paintbrush too. And while that's still wet, I'm just blending that out just to give it a little bit smoother finish on that textured watercolor paper that we stamped on. I'm going to go ahead and use my heat gun to dry that. You'll notice I haven't moved anything in my stamp positioning tool. And now I'm going to use the Make Art blendable die ink color in the color of, let's see here, violet. I'm going to ink up the flower portion of this stamp and mist that with water and then stamp that down. You could certainly stop right here. If you wanted a very light watercolor look to your brushstroke stamping and that is you just like to ink up your stamps and stamp them down, I think this is beautiful. I, of course, just love color, so I wanted to add a little bit more shading to mine. So I'm just going to clean off my stamp. I dried everything using my heat gun, and now I'm just using a mini archival ink. I chose this because I like the color, and it's a mini size, which makes it easy to get in and just apply it to certain portions of the stamp. I was kind of just trying to add it to the centers of the flowers to give that a little more dimension. Then I'm also going to go back here and add it towards the bottom of those 2 sets of flowers here on the lilacs. I use my finger just to smudge the edges so there's not a stark line where that ends. And I'll just add, this is just a little bit of the color of peat moss, again a mini archival ink. I grabbed it because I like the color and the mini size. Makes it easy to add onto the stamp. I'll blend those edges with my finger. You could certainly use a paper towel if you want to keep your hands cleaner than I do. And I'll just do that a couple of times so that I get a good impression onto that textured watercolor paper. I'm adding a little bit more of that cobalt onto the flowers. And the stamping is complete. Now I've left those masks on the bottom and the top portion of that watercolor paper. I've dried everything with my heat gun, and now I'm going in with my Gathered Twigs Distress ink using an ink blending tool with a foam pad. And I'm applying this ink, concentrating mainly along that part of the scroll where they sort of wraps up and around. That's where I want it to be the darkest, where that starts folding underneath that curl of the paper. And I'm just going to be careful here along that edge. My mask is curling up a little bit, but it's easy just to sort of hold that down as you go. Now I'm going to peel that up, and you can see you're already starting to get that great look of the scroll. I'm going to add that gathered twigs here down at the bottom, but making sure to leave the lightest color where we had that mask, so you get that sort of wrap around feeling, that dimension to the scroll die cut. I'll pick it up and add the right along the edges. It gives it more of a vintage, sort of burnt edge, old paper look to it. And then to finish off that scroll, I'm going to use an antique linen distress marker just to accent those stitching lines in that part where it wraps around. So I'm just going to color right over the top. And it's really easy then to go in and add your shading right there on that scroll. And that is how easy it is to ink up and stamp onto these scrolls. There is a million different ways you could use them, different stamps you can use them with, and they just are such a great base for whatever type of card you want to create. So for the next card, I'm going to use our Spontaneous Joy stamp, and following some of the same techniques, but adding a few other things in here with this brushstroke stamping. So I'm inking this up with the Make Art blendable dye inks. This is the color of Red Geranium. I'm trying to mainly just get that on the flowers. If I get it on the stems, I just wipe it off with my finger. I'm misting it with the mini mister of water and stamping that down. You can see I have the top and the bottom of the scroll masked off. And I'm so sorry for my head here. Sometimes it's hard for me to see what I'm doing, but I'm just blending that with a brush before it dries. So it's still wet from stamping, and I'm just blending it out to get a nice smooth look to that on the textured watercolor paper. I'm drying it with my heat gun, keeping everything still in my MISTI stamp positioning tool. I don't want to move those around. Now, if you don't have a stamp positioning tool, you could ink up your entire stamp and then mist it with water and then stamp it down. And you will get a beautiful watercolor look doing it that way. You don't need to do lots and lots of impressions. It just is one way if you want to intensify the colors or add more shading that you can do so. So what I'm doing to sort of intensify those colors and capture some of the detail that's part of the stamp is I'm going back over using a mini archival ink pad in the color of Vermilion, just inking that up and stamping it down without misting it. Now I'm using a black soot distress marker to add a little bit of shading to the center of these flowers. I wanted them to have the look of a poppy, so I'm just adding that black distress marker in there. I'm going to stamp that down. And I'll do that a few times just to intensify and darken up that color. We are stamping onto watercolor paper, which has some texture to it. So I want to do that more than once, even mist this here to sort of loosen up that color as it stamps down. Now I'm going to use a mini archival ink pad in the color of peat moss, and that mini pad really allows me just to get that down onto those stems and leaves. If I notice I get any on a flower petal, I just wipe it off. And I'm just going to stamp with that a couple of times. Again, just to make sure all the detail is captured and darken up the color. Now I wanted a really rich red color to this, and so I'm going to actually add just a little bit of re-inker. This is for the Make Art blendable dye inks in the color of red geranium. I put it on a little palette. I'm just picking it up with my brush and just painting it right on top just to add a little bit of extra color and a little more shading to this. And you can see it's just a little dab of that here and there, brightens things up a little bit. And that flower stamping is done. So I followed the same steps to ink the background in the scroll as I did on the first card. And now I am moving on to the third card. This is with our Becoming stamp. And I'm inking this with the Wendy Vecchi Make Art blendable dye ink in the color of Sunflower. Just focusing on getting up onto the actual flowers themselves, spritzing it with water, blending out any of those puddles or areas that I've stamped, just using a paintbrush. I've grabbed a water brush here. I actually couldn't find my other paintbrushes for some reason at this time, so I had a water brush handy and that's what I've used, but any paintbrush that you have will work for that. There's no technique really being done with the painting. Now I want to just sort of intensify those colors and capture that detail. So I'm grabbing Saffron Archival ink. I've grabbed this ink pad mainly because I just really like this color. It works well with the sunflower color that we stamped first. It's just a little bit darker. And you can see there those details are starting to appear really well. When I'm going to be misting the stamp, I like to use the Make Art blendable dye inks because they react well with water. And then for this part here, like where I'm going in and darkening up the color but I'm not misting it, you could use any type of ink that you like. I'm using here the Archival ink pads. This one is a mini in the color of Tiger Lily, and the mini size allows me to get only onto the portions of the stamp that I want to. Here I will get the leaves and the stems using the Peat Moss Mini Archival ink. Chosen this again because of that mini size. It's easy to just wiggle it around and get just right around the flowers without having to do any type of masking. I'm going to add just a little bit more intensity and blending to these flowers. So I've got my Make Art blendable dye ink re-inkers, the color of Sunflower, and then I'll also use I think I add a little bit of fern green on this one too. Just picking it up and swooshing a little bit over the flower itself. Because those darker colors I added on top, like the Tiger Lily, we're done with archival inks, they are permanent, so they're not going to start to pick up and reblend at all. So you're going to keep those details that you've stamped, but you can just sort of add the coloring right on top. And here's just a little bit of that added to those flower stems. I inked the scroll background just like I did for the first card, and now I'm ready to add my sentiments to all of these cards. So I'm using our new sentiments from our Happy Heart Day collection, but these sentiments have a lot that can be used for other than love cards and Valentine cards. So I've tried to grab some of those here just to show how you can create everyday cards that you can send to good friends or anyone that you want to know how much they mean to you. So I'm stamping this sentiment using Acorn Archival ink. I think it goes really well with sort of the vintage background that you get with this. And for the next card, I'm using a sentiment from our Love Sentiments transparent set. And this sentiment is So Many of My Smiles Begin With You. I just love that sentiment, and I particularly love the fonts used on this as well. And I'm stamping that again with the Acorn Archival ink. And getting it a couple of times here so that all the detail can be captured and I get a good impression on that watercolor paper. And then the last sentiment comes from our Word Sweet transparent set. And this is the You Make My Heart Smile sentiment. Again, anytime you could send this to a good friend or anyone special to you. It does not have to be just used for Valentine's. And I love that about these sentiment sets, that you can get a lot of use out of them. And this also was stamped with the Acorn archival ink. Now I wanted to show you how you can use the scroll die to create a shaped card. So you could take these and mount them onto a standard size card, or if you want your actual card to have the shape of the scroll, cut another die cut of that scroll. So that's what I've done here, just from a heavyweight white cardstock. I'm scoring that about an inch down from the top. And I'm going to put my adhesive above that score line. So I'm just using some double-sided tape, and I'm just going to put that right above the score line. And I want to have quite a bit there so that it is not going to come apart. Then you can just add your stamped panel right on top. And now your actual card is a hinge, and it's shaped in that shape of that scroll. And it will fit in your envelope for a standard A2 size card. So here's another look at all three of those paper scroll shaped cards stamped with our brushstroke stamps, some easy brushstroke stamping, and featuring our new Happy Heart Day sentiment collections. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on our blog and website, and I will list and link all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. I thank you so much for watching, and if you stay tuned, here at the very end of the video will be that complete list of all the supplies used.